Hello, we're live on Instagram or live on Facebook. I've got my phone set up and then I've got my laptop here so that this live stream can be put up on my blog. I don't know if you know this, laurensarcione.com/blog has an amazing blog feature now where you can see all of these live streams with a little tidbit of kind of almost like a behind the scenes description to what is being said in it. So, if this is your first time meeting me, my name is Lauren Cercione. I'm a personal trainer, an energy healer, and transformational coach. I am going to warn you right now that this live stream is not going to be for everyone. This is for the women who are interested in feminine reclamation work, which means that we are coming back to our bodies, to our intuition for our navigation versus just relying on willpower or our mindset alone. So in this live stream, I'm going to reintroduce you to the ancient woman who was tied to her menses, her menstrual cycle, the moon, and these two things, the menses and moon, actually meant the mind. And if you watch my stories, you know that I have been reading a ton about the goddess, which is the religious tradition that was intact for 300,000 years up until about 2 to 3,000 years ago, when men branched off from the community, the matriarchal egalitarian community where everybody was purposeful and everyone was equal. When they branched off and made their societies of royalty and priests and warriors, and then put everyone who did not fall into that category as evil pagans, which the old word for pagan is really just a description of living in unison with nature. And the easiest way to think about the religions of goddess and God is that the goddess is the X chromosome, the feminine body is the X chromosome, and we are able to create based on magnetism and our biology. And that is something that the male body just cannot do. And so there's a lot of things about psychic and the unknown, the mystery of life and the mysterious, the mystery of women themselves that can be alarming and very scary if you do not understand or comprehend what it actually means. And so I'm going to start shifting gears a bit here to share with you a little bit more about that, because the feminine reclamation of believing in our own body's intuition and wisdom and the interconnectivity of our experience with our menstrual cycle, the moon, and Earth itself. When we really tap into that, we're able to change the relationship that we have with our body and the habits associated with looking however it is that we want to look. And the reason why I've been so like going hard about looking the way we want to look and being okay with that is because for the feminine to design their body the way that makes them feel sexy and confident and happy, the things that we have to do to overcome those aren't just about bullies that maybe we had in our 20s or in our teenage years, and not just to do with what happened when we were growing up, where we usually just start to think about things, and myself included, before I started educating myself about the goddess, that it comes from a broken home, comes from an experience that we had with our parents that wasn't so good, or traumatizing events. But this is going to go even deeper, because when we get to the root of it, that a lot of times the reason why women are ashamed to say how they want to look, make the changes in their life, create boundaries, say no to things that don't fit what they want, and showing up fully as themselves, the reasons why on a deep seated level we have a hard time with that is actually because of how, when we switched from the 300,000 years of goddess into the last 2 to 3,000 years of God, is that everything that was all encompassing about the mystery of life and the mystery of women were just distilled down to evil. And this has really been upsetting me lately. And I just want to share one thing before we jump into it, just as an example. We have the right side of the body and the left side of the body. And the right side is usually associated with masculine energetics, and the left side usually with feminine. Well, when this new idea of God came into place, the feminine side of the body was actually called sinister. And so you can just hear by that the word sinister and feminine used to mean the same thing, but you know now what sinister represents to this day. So that is the deep-seated indoctrination that is in our bodies on a cellular level because of how life produces itself. So just a reminder, and I'm sure you already know this, but we were an egg inside of our mom's ovary when she was inside of your grandmother, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So when you are doing your deep inner work for feminine reclamation, you're actually able to tap into your line of women, where they came from, and how they believed the goddess and how the communion of energy, the earth, the moon, and the menstrual cycle were all interconnected. And so this is deep work. And we know that in order for us to change our body image or our self esteem and become the person who's able to do all of the habits necessary, we have to change it on the identity level. That's something that we've heard for a very long time. You have to change who you are on the inside for any of those things to last long enough to not just get results, but then compound them, increase the results over time, where you just age like a fine wine instead of just working towards an after picture and then going back to whoever you were before you started dieting and exercising for that result, thinking that this new you can be sustained in the old identity. So we have all these amazing tools with psychology and attachment theory for us to investigate what is actually going on and put language to the sensations that we're having in our body. So all of that is fabulous, and all of that is in the Fat Life, which stands for process, heal, align, transcend. My system is built where 100 women could walk through these doors today and everything would be organized from the moment you step into the classroom and watch the onboarding video to being guided to how to find your astrology placements and your human design placements that are so important to this deep work. And then also assessing how you feel about food and dieting and how you feel about your body and exercise. Like they're on like Google Sheets that I get a spreadsheet so that then when we do coaching calls together, I know exactly what's going on with you from beginning through the middle of the coaching process to ultimately the end, where you can create a new identity and then just keep going along with the habits to sustain it. So the Fat Life is complete, and I'm so excited about it because now I can really switch gears into expressing to you and sharing with you the thing that is really the most important to me. And the thing that is the most important is the connection with our soul. And for the last 2 to 3,000 years, depending on what patriarchal religion you adhere to, at this time in society, you might be waiting for somebody to come save you. You might be waiting for someone to descend from the clouds and scoop you up to heaven because this evil, awful, materialistic place is your demise. But here's the thing with that. In the goddess religion and the belief in goddess in the unison, everything has a purpose. And the material form, the body, the female body, earth, is not evil and is not inherently sinister or unworthy. And so these are the things that we have to uncover and get rid of within our mind and body so that we can move forward and like really step into who we want to be. So, what I want to share with you is that how you undo this is by using your relationship with food and dieting, and then also your relationship with exercise. Because when you investigate and you work with food from a standpoint to say, I feel bad if I eat bad food, I feel good when I eat good food. That is the duality that comes with the patriarchal religion of right and wrong, good or bad, you're going to heaven or you're going to hell. And the in between does not matter. So when we start to really like unpack all of this indoctrination that we've had, especially because Uranus, the planet, the great awakener, is moving signs in the zodiac this year. So we are coming into a new belief system in what we think life is and who we think or what we think God is. So you're probably already starting to feel some questions arise within you of what is life and what is God and what is going to happen given the current conditions of the earth with what's going on in the weather, with politics, with finance, with relationships with people, with gender identity. All of that stuff is up in the air right now for good reason because it's matching the planets. So let's dive into remembering this ancient woman. So, first, I'm going to start with the menses. So, our period, the blood in our period, if we do not gestate, if we do not start to host another human being, our womb liner sheds, right? We all know this. So we have our menstrual blood, but that blood is actually super potent, full of nutrition and full of the information from all of the women that came from before you and all of their experiences. And so the menses, what ends up happening in this cycle, that reflects in what we see in the moon, where there is a darkness, a sinking down, like really low key energy that comes before the new moon, before the sunrise, but before the new moon. And so we have that experience when we're in our premenstrual syndrome. And the unfortunate thing about how doctors have diagnosed women and our experience in the female body is that the time before our new moon, our menstrual cycle, is just kind of chucked away into us being neurotic, being depressed, angry, moody, all of those things. But the power of that time leading up to the new moon is that we're actually in a mourning process for what the earth and all of her creatures have given to us to sustain our life. Because we cannot live without something else dying. So, for the ancient woman and the egalitarian societies that the matriarch hosted, where everybody was evil or everybody was equal, there was no hierarchy. When a woman was coming into the dark period before her menstrual cycle, that was a time where we actually all as a community reflected on what we were able to consume to sustain our life. And so this is where we get the blood rituals. And the blood rituals is that if the woman was not hosting another human being to create life, she used her life blood and gave it back to the earth. And so that nutrition goes back into Mother Earth so that she can regenerate herself and that we are truly living in a symbiotic relationship with her. But what happened when when the patriarchy changed this 2 to 3,000 years ago and created a different way of worshiping some entity that gave us life, because the man does not bleed without a wound. We, as a woman, are bleeding without a wound. And to the ancient mind, to not die from this blood was this representation of how we are self-healing and self-regenerating. And there's even instances in science where we can investigate that we all actually came from the primordial ocean of the mother. And an egg inside of a woman's body has an electromagnetic field that influences mitosis, how the cells start to duplicate, and what sperm she's able to attract to her for the perfect match, for the perfect human combination of those two parents. So when we really like hear this, and I know this is kind of a lot, when we really hear this, we really discover that our bodies are super powerful. And so if we don't have the goddess religion that everything is connected and that there has to be death in order to give life, and we have to have reverence and appreciation for our life experience and who it's actually coming from. If we don't have that in the patriarchal religion that's based on a male who cannot bleed without a wound, then there is something out of balance within blood ritual. And so, if you have been going down the spiritual rabbit holes about the cabal and the Illuminati and adrenochrome, a lot of these things that have to do with sacrifice and torture and blood are the imbalance, the like overdoing of the monthly blood ritual that the ancient women and the egalitarian community participated in. And so once we really start to look at this, like, okay, like number one, the atrocities that we see with mass murder, with war, also have to do with our menstrual cycle, because at the root of it, right? This is identity work. This is feminine reclamation work during the time of a great awakening because of Uranus. So this is the root issue of it. And so once you start to see this of like, okay, if I'm going to be upset about something that's going on in the world, especially around war, where are parts of me that I'm actually getting rid of, not getting rid of your period, but like disassociating from the experience? Because I'll tell you this is the segue into the moon, that for the menstrual cycle, having a reflective aspect of the moon cycle, where we have that dark night before the new moon, before we get to plant seeds for what we want to create, and then the quarter moon, and then whatever moon comes after that, until we're leading up to the full moon, where we have a culmination of our desires being manifested. Then we have the moon tapering off again to go dark again, to then have the new moon. So when we're looking at this in terms of our cycle and the connection with the moon, we can take that information that we have around our own menstrual cycle, that PMS time when our mood drops and we're not feeling really good, instead of trying to cover it up, we actually just start to feel the emotions that we're having, because those emotions have to do with death, because we cannot live without something else dying. So same thing with the moon. When we're experiencing the cycles of the moon, in the goddess religion, she is actually the illuminary that is transmitting the transits of the cosmos, the asteroids, the planets, other solar systems. It's like she's taking all that information and then shining it out to us for us to psychically interpret. Because here's the other part of it: menses, moon, and mind were all the same meaning, even though they had three different words. And so when I've been putting this together, what I'm realizing is that the reason why women would sit around the moon or sit around a fire during under the moon, talking about what was going on in the community, talking about what's going on with themselves or with their body, they're actually transmitting and connecting the deep unconscious, the seat of the soul, the root of the mind. And so once you start to put these things together, right? So you probably know that the feminine energy is associated with the snake or the dragon, the kundalini energy that is coiled at the base of the spine, that when awakened illuminates your mind, brings you into a higher consciousness. Well, the serpent, the snake, was associated with the feminine body, because as the snake sheds its skin, so does the lining of the womb if it's not hosting another human. So the snake was symbolic, was a symbol of the same act that happened within the feminine body, a regeneration. And that when we had this dragon, right, that all the patriarchy wants to kill, you want to slay the dragons, they're the bad guys. When we awaken this kundalini energy and it rises into our mind and gives us a higher consciousness, that higher mind aspect is directly connected to the moon. And we know this just by the language that they used. So this really blew my mind about the mind, because if we look at the systems of oppression that have to do with hierarchy of people's value, and war for offense, for dominion, for control and power, versus defensive war, where you are just defending your life, when we look at all these structures, anything that is associated with the feminine is made, like, it's made evil, it's made unclean, it's made unworthy, and it's also made unreal. So when I was looking at this about the moon mind, and that we are unconsciously transmitting messages, information from the moon, especially during our menses, when we're in sync with that natural rhythm of sadness and mourning for death, then the regeneration that we feel when our period starts and we're like, okay, I feel like myself again. And you feel like all the go energy and like you're ready to take on the world. You could be really strict with your eating and your exercise until the hormones start to change again. Same thing with the moon. So when I was looking at this as, okay, so if the symbology of the Kundalini energy, of the snake rising to give us a higher consciousness, and that our unconscious, our quote unquote unconscious, is associated with the moon, and the moon is associated with transmitting energy from all the cosmos, and it has ebbs and flows so that we can create what we want and we can release what we don't want, then it makes sense that the primitive part of the mind that is also called the reptilian mind, and a snake is a reptile, it would make sense that this part of us was called un. So, as I'm reading all of this information about what was actually happening in the world and in the minds of men and women leading up to the Bronze Age, 2 to 3,000 years ago, or maybe the Bronze Age wasn't 3,000 years ago, but the patriarchal religions are 2 to 3,000 years ago. I was realizing that, oh my gosh, this is what it means. We are ultra connected, not only to ourselves, but to the cosmos and to each other, because our blood in the women that come before us, they all started somewhere, right? So, like, I come from the Fertile Crescent. So, for me, it makes sense that I'm going to be upset about the Palestinian genocide, right? I have Arabic blood on my mother's side, I have Jewish blood on my dad's side. And that area, the cradle of civilization, was goddess worship. Everywhere before the patriarchy was goddess worship. So as I'm putting this stuff together and I'm like, oh my gosh, like the fat life is how we decondition ourselves from this, how we use the tools of eating and exercise that often become weapons against ourselves because of the conditioning of our mind that makes us exit our bodies and not trust them. So you know that you hear all these things from fitness coaches like me who stop the extreme dieting, who stop the extreme workouts. We're like moderation, but there's time that you have to learn moderation, where you have to give your body a break from the dieting and the extreme exercise. You have to allow yourself to eat the indulgences that you don't let yourself eat, and you actually have to get in touch with your feelings while you're eating these forbidden foods to really comprehend, where is this self-judgment coming from? How did a cupcake become evil? And how are you bad because you're eating this cupcake? How does eating the cupcake make you feel a lack of self-worth because you're not doing a good enough job for your dream body? And that all comes from this indoctrination that we all received as the religious belief in God around the world changed. And then you know that we had a very dark time of the witch hunts, where really it was just women who were healers and midwives were hunted down and murdered. So there's a lot that's happening with our body, and there's a lot that we have access to feeling and processing wise because of what's happening with the astrology. We're heading into eclipse season, and the North Node is in Pisces, and the South Node is in Virgo. Virgo is what we get to learn from. The South Node is what we get to learn from so that we can evolve into that North Node. So, when we're looking at this very interesting concept that time is cyclical. Time is an occurrence of cyclical energy. So we're coming into a new time that's really going to start on February 20th of 2026, when Saturn and Neptune conjunct at 0 degrees Aries. That's the beginning of the zodiac, especially, well, Aries is the beginning of the zodiac, but the 0 degrees, the very beginning of it. And the last time that we had the conjunction in 0 degrees Aries was during the Inquisitions, where if you didn't believe in this patriarchal external God that had judgment, you were murdered. And the only way you got past it is if you hid yourself and you did not let anybody know that you didn't believe in him. And with the coming of AI, how AI is changing so much, and how, like, sometimes you can't even tell if you're watching an AI video or if you're watching a real video. The next church is technology. The next advancement is bioengineering. So if you really start to expand your mind of like, we are separating our intelligence, our mind, even more from the body, the more we participate in these things. In which obviously, like I use AI, we use AI to drive, we use AI everywhere, right? But what I'm saying is, if we completely let our decision making that should be based on intuition go into a computer or be ruled by a computer, which is what a lot of us are anticipating our governments are going to do to us, be ruled by technology versus actual humans making intuitive decisions based on discernment and putting things together, critical thinking, right? The AI is not going to have the critical thinking of emotion and context for things that we are going to be facing. Like, could you imagine being policed by a drone? If you were speeding because you had to get to the hospital because somebody was in trouble and you just got pulled over or your car got turned off, like, I was speeding once when my rabbit was dying, and I got pulled over, and I told the police officers, "I'm trying to get to the vet," and my rabbit was in my arm while I was driving, and they're like, "Is that your dog?" I'm like, "No, no, it's my rabbit, he's dying." And you know what they said? They said, "Slow down." They said, "Go and slow down, drive more safely." But if it was an AI drone, would that have happened? If I had refused to pull over, would my car just turn off or would I go to jail for not following? Like, this is like real stuff that we're going to be, that we could be potentially experiencing. So, for the woman who's doing the feminine reclamation work, the way that we do this is directly through our body. And so this is why I announced just, a day ago, that I'm doing new and full moon ceremonies. They're on Zoom. They are free. I'm going to share with you some of the wisdom from the ancient woman and share with you how you can use the astrology that's being transmitted through the moon and how you can really connect with yourself within the cycles of the moon and relate them to your menstrual cycle. Because when you have that as your foundation, then it's like, okay, now it's easier to prepare for moderation. Now it's easier to prepare that this is you speaking, that I'm going to use eating to really evaluate my feelings. Because in the fat life, how we decondition all of this indoctrination about why you should feel bad for how much you weigh or why you should feel bad for what you ate is we assess how you feel about food. And so it's very simple. You just observe what it is that you're thinking and feeling while you're eating. And if you're someone who does yo yo diets where you'll go really hard, maybe the first 2 weeks after your cycle, and you're like, I'm going to be this strict the entire time for 4 months, and then your hormones start to change because you're going to get your cycle. And so then that's when the cravings increase. That's when you have lower energy and you want to eat so that you can have more energy to keep up with this go, go, go feeling, which could also be associated with a little bit of the Virgo of perfectionism. And I have to do things in this very specific way, hence pulling you out of your body again. When you use this with your food and you can actually feel those emotions where you're like, wow, like I am judging myself as good for eating, brown rice, broccoli, and chicken. And then all of a sudden, it's like you start to feel so good and you see these results and your clothes are on the scale. And then now all of a sudden, you deserve to have a treat. So this deserving because you were good goes completely against the feminine intuition of a cycle. It goes directly into the patriarchal, you must do this or else. And so the you must do this or else that we have been indoctrinated in goes into every aspect of society. And it goes into the diet culture, it goes into hustle culture. And this is why so many women get burnt out with their hormones. So then when they are in their 50s, it's like menopause hits and everything tanks, and there's this rapid weight gain, and you feel terrible. Well, for our whole life, we've been indoctrinated to believe that if we don't work hard enough and if we don't do a good job and we don't stick with it, if we're not consistent, no matter what, then we won't get to our results. And because we have this attachment of our worth to the results, then we feel bad and we drop out of our power and our intuition. And then we are super susceptible to whatever marketing campaigns go along for you to get quick results or results without even having to do anything. The other way that we do this in the fat life is with assessing your body. And so the mirror work that we do in the fat life is you actually just look at yourself in the mirror, ideally naked, so that you can really look at your full body and discern how you actually feel about it and yourself. So, what that means is you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I don't like my fat stomach. I don't like my fat thighs. I don't like the way my arms jiggle. These are like all of my things. Why? Why do we feel those things? Because in other cultures, if especially if you're not in America, that's all very, very sexy. A voluptuous body is actually the depiction of the goddess because that voluptuousness represents fertility, and fertility represents life and abundance. But when we look at it from whatever culture that we're in right now, if we're like, I don't feel good because I have fatty thighs, and we know that there's other parts of the countries that a big voluptuous fatty thigh is like delectable to the opposite sex, then we have to actually rationalize with ourselves to be like, okay, the reasons why I don't like body parts is actually a cultural thing. So, where do I have to change these stories culturally that inhibit my feeling of power and self worth because of these body parts? That's number one. Number two, when we're doing this type of mirror work, is we look at the body parts that aren't healthy or aren't functioning well. So for me, this went back to my neck. So I pull out the book from Louise Hay. What does cervical injury mean? What does a stiff neck mean? What does cervical spine injury mean? What does inflammation in the gut mean? Like you look up, you use the tools that we have access to try to understand why certain body parts aren't performing optimally or deteriorating. Because here's the thing with body parts that are deteriorating or are not functioning properly, they're actually storing way more emotion, way more energy than you could possibly imagine, plus the meaning that you have given it. Because for the body to break down in body parts, two things have to happen. Number one, the energy has to be there. So the emotion. So, like for the neck, what comes up a lot for the neck is always looking at the past, being rigid in your thinking. And when I was started this work in 2015, I was like, okay, where am I looking in the past? And up until last year, it was the haunting memories that I had with my dad and my stepmom of certain things where I really felt attacked and not supported, rejected, blamed, shamed. Really stuck with me where I had been working really hard to not feel those feelings or like somehow take whatever that experience was that I made my identity, like, and like all the work I did was trying to fix those things so that then, however they were imparting their judgment on me, if I could fix the ways that they felt about me, that I was storing those emotions, then I would feel good about myself. So we have to have the emotion in our body, number one. But then for the body parts to break down or be dysfunctional, we have to have a mindset judgment about how those emotions, how that energy makes us a bad person. Do you follow me? So when we're doing this work in the fat life where we're taking a look at the feelings that we have by using the food as a mirror, then when we stand in front of the mirror and we look at the body parts that we don't like to really find where we need to decondition our culture, and then when we assess the metaphysical reasons for the body parts that are breaking down or not performing well, that are unhealthy, then we can find not only the energy, but also the meaning and the identity and the judgment that we have. Because these things are all going into why you overdo or you underdo your habits. This is why you have this really hard pendulum swinging back and forth of super strict adherence to maybe doing nothing for a couple of months, or super strict adherence and then an all out binge. That's where those habits are coming from. So when we use our menstrual cycle to comprehend that we are going to have ebbs and flows as we're moving towards our dream body, and we impart this feminine reclamation mindset as our new truth, that we are connected to everything, which means we're connected to the planets that are moving this year, the transpersonal planets, which means that we can connect with the moon, follow the cycle of the moon, of how there is a creation, how there is the planting of a seed, how there is the nurturing, how there is the culmination, how there is the reflection of the culmination, to actually appreciate what was just birthed, and then ultimately the dying process where we release that experience. Right? Because if we're doing feminine reclamation embodiment work, we're looking at the entire experience as a cycle, not linear. Our bodies and time are not linear, they happen over and over and over again. So I'm really excited to share this with you, and I'm really hoping that it's landing, and I know that it's going to land for the right person who is wanting to get back into her body, doing the feminine reclamation work, and is open and ready to move with the next evolution of society as these planets are changing. Because 2025, it's going to be quite a ride, especially with the eclipses. And then after this year, once these planets are in new stations, now it's the next society. We're in a time where new spiritual ideologies are birthed. And so you can look back at other times that these planets moved. You can do your little Google. You can ask Chat GPT. Sometimes Chat GPT has better information than Google now. And so you can really start to see, like, all this inner work that we've been doing, especially if you have cardinal signs and you've had the last 16 years with Pluto, and you've been in this deep inner world of excavating and deconditioning your mind from all of this. Like, now is the time for us to really tap in and connect with our cycle, connect with our body, connect with each other, connect with the moon, so that we can move our dream body where we want it aesthetically, but also move our bodies and our lives with the change of civilization instead of just sinking with it. So that's really awesome. So you can go to my website to sign up for the moon. And you can go to the highlight reels in my Instagram. You can go to the pinned post on Facebook. You can check out the links in the YouTube description. And I hope to see you there. The next one, or the very first one, is on March 14th at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And you'll just want to sign in, or register for it, and check your spam for the double opt in to make sure that you get the email, because I will email you. Once you're on that list, you're on the list until you unsubscribe. And the list is going to send you a 1 week reminder for a new moon or a full moon ceremony, and an hour reminder, and then also an email 1 week later, so that you can just like kind of follow up on some integration stuff. Okay, bye.